Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. I am so happy to be here talking with y'all about Nashville soccer, and I am doing that, of course, with Clay Trainum and Valer Shabilla. Gentlemen, we a little bit happier of a mood today. We didn't have to watch Nashville soccer over the weekend.
I
Uh,
didn't have to watch Nashville or Everton this weekend. What a weekend. I mean, unbelievable. It's
Yeah.
crazy at how much better Saturday is when I don't have to watch either of those teams play. It's
And if you
amazing. I
were
love
if you were one of the 3,500 people who attended the game in Huntsville, you saw Nashville Soccer Club technically win. So there's that for you. That's an
it.
extra little thing. Not only did you not see them lose, you saw them win.
Well, and the best part about it, obviously, is that they won with both goals scored by a guy who has exclusively played for Huntsville this season.
Who cannot feature for Nashville SC in the MLS?
even though we would really like him to feature for Nashville,
Yeah.
probably in MLS in some way. No, there's a lot of football over the weekend.
Yeah.
A lot of football, both good and depressing on my end. I don't know. I didn't really do anything this weekend. I went to a house show, like a house music show over the weekend, which was a lot of fun. I didn't know like what the age limit of going to like a show at a house would be because I haven't been to one in years, but it was fun.
I was curious if it was a show at a house or a show that featured house music.
It
So,
was a show at it was a show at
important
a house.
distinction.
I'm
It
more likely
at
to
a
go
house.
to
It was not a
that.
house music show.
Yeah. I
I
did watch a lot of football though. I watched like too much, one would say. Between Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, there was a lot of the NFL going on, which kind of made this whole thing about the Titans feel better because my fantasy teams are winning. So at least there's that for me. And when you go into the season like extremely delusional, like I was, I think this was a good reality check for me week one for the Titans. So all that said, watched a lot of football on the couch, which is the best way to watch NFL, by the way.
Also, real quick, I want to trail back to the 30 seconds ago conversation. The last time I did go to an actual house show, Valer was there and he was extremely intoxicated, yelling at the DJ to keep playing Kanye. So that
That
was always a
sounds
good.
like not me. I would never do such thing. People know I don't do that.
Well, anyway, I want to take this moment to personally apologize for the Tennessee Titans. So I was working volleyball all weekend, and so I didn't watch any of my football teams play, really. I know that Indiana won by 74 points, which is wild. And because they are the team in Indiana that can beat a directional Illinois school, which is not something that every Indiana team can claim right now. So shout out to Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. Indiana
Amazing.
beat Western Illinois by 74. And then I didn't get to watch it. I didn't get to watch Ball State win, but I'm working volleyball all weekend down here at MTSU, volleyball all day Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so it gets to the last match on Sunday. The Titans are up 17-0. I decided I'm going to pull up the game so I can flip over during stoppages and watch the game. First play I got to see of the Titans game on Sunday was a punt return touchdown. The
Mm.
third play I got to see of the Titans game on Sunday was Will Levis throwing an interception. No, it was a fumble, and then after that was a Will Levis interception. So I saw four plays from the Titans game on Sunday, and three of them were incredibly bad for the Titans. So it's my fault, and I apologize to everyone out there.
I appreciate you taking responsibility, but it doesn't make up for the pain. I just hope you know that.
Yeah. Well, I did what I can.
What do I do now? Is this do we? I don't know how to necessarily
I
do
think
that
that we should
soccer. So
mention that Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois one more time.
I
I'm fine with
honestly,
that. I agree. All in favor? Say aye.
Yeah, I.
That's 2-3.
just like the name of this show, I got outvoted again. All that said,
Shout out to the Mac.
I think we can go ahead and transition back to what we were talking about with Huntsville. So the game ended 2-0, and like we alluded to earlier, Ruben Pacius. I think that's how you say his name.
Passius.
Who Pacius. Okay, well he's Canadian, and the reason Nashville SC the reason why he can't play for Nashville SC is because he does require an international slot, and Nashville SC loaned him out to Huntsville for the entire season. Now, I don't know if a lot of folks remember, but his signing took a little bit longer to come through. But when it was finally here, he was injured and he hasn't been able to feature for Huntsville from the beginning of the season. However, since he started featuring for Huntsville a few months ago now, he's been doing really well and he's been scoring goals. In this friendly between Huntsville and Nashville SC, he represented Nashville SC, which was there was a lot of these players who kind of like either playing for Huntsville and now playing for NSC. Um, and he was able to score twice to kind of seal the deal for Nashville SC against Huntsville, who I obviously didn't get to watch the match because there wasn't a stream or anything, but from everything I'm reading and hearing, Huntsville actually put a lot of pressure on Nashville in the first half, hit the post twice actually, or the bar at least. But no luck, obviously, there. Nashville ended up getting the win.
Yep.
Or do I just keep going? I think it was cool to see like some academy players feature for Huntsville. I think that's important. And then obviously Adam Sipich featured for Nashville SC. Jordan Knight played for Nashville SC as well. Another assist for Perez, who has been with Nashville SC, of course, and has been really lively. So these players that we don't get to see as much kind of feature. And then the Huntsville roster was full of academy products, which was pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah, Valer, this is one of those instances where you forgot that you do have a little bit more access than us and a little bit more information to a friendly that both Clay and I could not attend or watch or have any
You
sort of
could
access
attend.
to.
You could drive down to Huntsville and attend. And also, this is not access. This is just me doing
I
research
can
because I
drive
cover
down to
this team,
Huntsville.
Stephen.
I can drive down to Huntsville and attend.
Yeah, you
You
can.
you could, yes. You can buy a ticket and walk into the stadium. I'm pretty sure it was cheap.
Steven, now that's not even that long a drive by the standards of drives that we did when Nashville was playing in the lower leagues.
Yeah, not this wouldn't even crack like top five of this podcast alone.
Yeah. And so it's a minor league soccer game featuring Nashville SC players. I mean, come on. Don't act like this is some unbelievable drive that we haven't done.
Speaking of those long drives, Clay, this is how I always try to describe like people, like describe you to people. I'm like, look, let me tell you, Clay Trainum is the best person to be in a car with and also the worst person to be in a car with for a road trip. It's the best experience you'll ever have. The best because of the fact that you're going to stay awake because you are going to have a conversation about, I don't know, Indian cricket or Evansville for 2 hours, but then you're having that conversation. So it's a good time.
The worst is because if you are not driving and you do want to sleep, you just can't. But if you are driving, this is exactly what you want.
Well, I mean, you guys did invite me on a show where I'm supposed to talk for an hour.
Hey,
So,
hey, I'm not complaining. One time
Yeah, that wasn't
we
complaining. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
We riff on everybody else, but you riff
The
on
anyway,
me.
anyway, I will say this to take Stevens back. Driving down 81 through Virginia is a nightmare that I don't wish upon anyone because it feels like it never ends
For that.
until you get, of course, to Dinosaur Kingdom 2, a favorite of this show that everyone should go visit.
I
And-
I
Which I
really
need to
thought you
go
were
to.
talking about Huntsville, and I was like 81, dude. It's just 65. What are you talking about? Just go south. It's on the signs.
oh no, Huntsville's an easy drive for us. I
Yeah.
was just meaning like 81 and,
Yeah.
and through Virginia is a nightmare.
Anytime Clay can bring up Dinosaur World, he's going to find a way to bring up Dinosaur World.
Dinosaur Kingdom 2. Dinosaur World is a different attraction. That is on 65. That's 65 North going toward Bowling Green. Also a good time, but you don't get dinosaurs fighting the Union Army in Civil War, in the Civil War at Dinosaur World. You do get that at Dinosaur Kingdom 2. It's an important distinction. Just keep that in mind.
Yo, we need
And
Nashville soccer back.
as I somehow been in charge of bringing this back to soccer again, uh, we will talk about soccer this next segment, and we will continue to give you what you need for Nashville SC. But in the meantime, before we do that, I do want to give a huge shout out to everybody who's subscribed to our Patreon. We can't do this without you. So we appreciate all of you. You kind of keep us going. So if you aren't part of the Patreon yet, you can do it for $5, of course. And it's $5 a month. That's all it is. It's a cup of coffee, and depending where you get your coffee, it might be cheaper. So than $5. So like, go give us the money you would get for your coffee. I don't know where this is going, but precisely what I'm trying to say is subscribe to our Patreon, like all of our beautiful Patreons already do, and help us keep going with this show. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say to end this segment. Steven, you got anything else?
Adult Valer tells us to talk about soccer, then asks for money 10 seconds later. This is ridiculous. I don't understand.
Let's get to the next segment, guys.
All right.
And we'll be back to talk about more soccer here next on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We also have a Patreon, as Valer mentioned in that first segment. Please go check that out. It does help support the show. We love doing this. We love keeping on doing this. We really like just making fun of each other in segments where we don't have soccer to talk about. So if you want to keep supporting the show, please do so at Patreon. We also have a website, pharmasoccer.com, so please check that out as well. So because of the fact we did not necessarily have a match to talk about this week or last week, we have some international soccer to talk about, which we will hear in a second. But Nashville still technically, even though they are in last place in the East, does have a possibility to make the playoffs this year in MLS. As Valera has alluded to in past episodes, making MLS playoffs is extremely too easy. And it's easy. I mean, Nashville still has a chance to make the playoffs still, even in the position that they're in. This weekend against Atlanta is going to be a big test to that. But before getting into that, we figured that we would kind of explain just how it works, how playoffs work in MLS this year, the format, kind of what's going on, and what it means for Nashville in its entirety, and what Nashville does need to do to either get that playoff spot or have something worse even happen. So, how do you kind of want to just start by explaining the actual format itself, Valer, and why Nashville is still kind of in the running for it?
Yeah, so this is the second year where MLS is using this format, and full disclosure, I totally hate it. It's one of the worst things I've seen in my life. That said, this doesn't change how the actual format goes on. So the top 9 teams of each conference make the playoffs. 8 and 9 technically make the postseason, not the playoffs, which is the play-in game. So 8 versus 9. The team in 8 seed gets to host one game against the team in 9 seed. Whoever wins makes the actual playoffs. Now you have 8 teams in the playoffs. One plays 8, two plays 7, three plays 6, so on and so forth. But these are not one-off games. These are 3-game series with the higher seed hosting game 1 and game 3 if needed. Now, if one of the teams seals it in 2 games, they don't play the third game, obviously. There are no ties in this format at all. If the game ends in a tie, it goes straight to penalties. After that, it goes back to the 1-game single elimination with the higher seed hosting until you get a winner of the Eastern Conference and the winner of the Western Conference, where they face off each other in MLS Cup. I think one of the biggest reasons they did this is to increase the number of games in the playoffs, which they did successfully, obviously, with the 3-game series. Last year, Nashville SC it made the playoffs, ended up having to face Orlando in a 3-game series directly. They didn't have to do the play-in game. They lost the first game 1-0 in Orlando. Then they lost 1-0 at home at Geodis Park and exited the playoffs without even playing that third game. This season, it looks like for Nashville to make it, they're currently 6 points behind the team in 9th place, which is DC United. They do have a game in hand on DC United. Now, obviously, a game in hand doesn't mean an automatic 3 points. And for Nashville at the moment, they can't even buy a goal, let alone points. So, yes, mathematically, they're still in. And even, an optimist would tell you there's a chance for them to get in. However, between them and DC United, there are six other teams. And I think that's where the challenge comes in, because those six teams are all within a few points of each other, and all of them either have a game in hand or are just better suited to make the playoffs than Nashville at this point.
I do think it's worth noting that Nashville's run in is as it is what you would want if you were in Nashville's shoes in order to catch up. So they, of course, have 7 matches left. 2 of those 7 matches are against New York City FC and FC Cincinnati. Nashville did beat FC Cincinnati earlier this year and has typically done well at least getting a point out of those matches, although FC Cincinnati the last couple of years is quite different than in years past, of course. But the rest of those games are twice against Chicago, New England, DC, and Atlanta. These are all also bad teams. And this is something, it's the best thing about MLS. It's the worst thing about MLS. It's a league of teams that are all kind of within a standard deviation of each other. So you can certainly envision a way where Nashville wins a game or two and suddenly finds themselves right back in the middle of that playoff hunt. But you can also say the same about any of those teams. And
And
so that is like the at the bottom of the playoffs every year, as Nashville learned last year, honestly. It's a bit of a dogfight because all of these teams are basically pretty much in the same ballpark of how good they are. Now, the other side of that is Nashville spent a whole lot more money to be down there than almost every other team around them. So that is the downside of all of that. But you can certainly envision a team where Nashville maybe gets a little bit of momentum. Maybe it gets started this weekend, picks up maybe a win or two, and then suddenly they're putting pressure on everyone else around them.
And the one thing to keep in mind in this is that when you look at, like, let's say the Premier League and you're looking at the relegation zone, those are 3 teams, right? And those 3 teams might play each other. To where here you have these 6, 7 teams, 8, 9 teams, even really, if you look at the whole thing, and they are definitely taking points from each other. So let's take Nashville, Atlanta, for example. Nashville win doesn't only put them ahead by 3, that puts them closer to Atlanta by 3 points. It takes those 3 points away from Atlanta, and so on and so forth, because they're playing teams around them, because the entire Eastern Conference is playing kind of, they're going to be taking points from each other. So that's kind of what makes this a little bit more interesting here, to where a Nashville win against DC or New England or Atlanta, it's double. It's a 6-pointer, right? And same thing with Chicago, who, by the way, are ahead of Nashville by a point, but Nashville has a game on hand on them. And I think that's kind of brings us to what this next discussion is, of where does Nashville actually finish up?
Technically, they're ahead on goal differential. Okay.
Oh, my bad. Did I say? Or did I say? Oh, it's the same points. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Well, Nashville does have the possibility to gain momentum, but they also have the possibility of keeping their current run of form, which is absolutely fantastic. And
They've won 1 in a row, Steven. What are you talking about?
so
what 10-game streak? They've won 1 in a row.
say Nashville does keep the same MLS run of form that they currently do have. The dreaded, I don't even want to say the possibility of the wooden spoon. What is the possibility of Nashville gaining that spoon? And then I have trivia for Clay after this.
I've always said that I'm a longtime San Jose Earthquakes fan. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows that I love the Quakes. I think, Steven Lenhart, he's still out. He's not been out there for a long time.
It's been a minute. It's been a full minute.
But San Jose, right now, the best team as far as I'm concerned in MLS, because they're 9 points off the pace of Nashville, and they may keep that wooden spoon out of Nashville's dreaded hands this year. So shout out to San Jose. Shout out to the Quakes.
I think the Eastern Conference teams, it's too close to call. Like I was saying, they're all kind of taking points from each other, to where what Clay was saying in San Jose, that's kind of Nashville's only hope, really, where they, it's surprising to me that they are this bad, honestly, because if you watch that team play, They play really well. I think
And they have some decent players on their squad as well.
and they have decent players. They signed Pellegrino this season, but obviously they have Espinoza, who's been a stellar for them throughout. And just, I mean, obviously they're struggling. I think their coach is an interim basis too, but I'm not. And they had good Leagues Cup results too. This is not a San Jose podcast. Sorry, I regress. But all I'm saying is that I can see them making a run, but at this point, 9 points ahead for Nashville SC is a little too steep for them.
San Jose also has, to be fair, has a not it doesn't have a game in hand on Nashville, but they still have 7 matches remaining. But unfortunately for them, those 7 matches are Vancouver, who's in the playoffs, Seattle, who's in the playoffs, St. Louis, who's bad, Montreal, who's bad. But then they finish with FC Dallas, who's looking for the playoffs, and then RSL and LAFC on the last
Tough.
2 weekends of the season.
Tough.
So they are almost certainly not going to catch up to Nashville with that run in.
And if you didn't get the context specifically and say you did not know, the wooden spoon is given for the worst team in the league. This is a supporters trophy, just like the supporters shield is. It's passed out by the Independent Supporters Council every year. I always think it's a cool fact. Clay, 2 bits of trivia for you that I want to ask, and I guess Valera can answer these too, about the wooden spoon. The official trophy didn't start until 2015 per se, but the wooden spoon has been an award just given to the worst team in MLS since its existence. So, what 2 teams are tied with the most wooden spoons in MLS?
Chicago and Cincinnati, right?
Wrong and wrong.
Since 2015?
Well, no. Who was like the actual inaugural award when they gave an actual trophy came in 2015. But in MLS,
So you're saying since '96?
yes,
DC?
DC is one.
Yeah. I don't know who the other would be. DC is the easy bet.
San Jose.
San Jose is the other one. That is correct.
Let's go. Let's go.
And
I will
then
say that I'm
good.
definitely right for since the wooden spoon's been around, because they were going to name it the Andrew Hauptman Memorial Wooden
that
Spoon.
is correct. I was going to ask you who won the initial actual trophy in 2015. That was going to be my next question.
And technically Cincinnati didn't win it 3 times because they didn't award it
Nah,
for the
we're not
first
doing that.
season.
Nah,
Even
nah,
though
nah,
it was
nah, nah.
historically the worst season at that point in time in MLS history, until Cincinnati later had a worse season. So no, they've got 3 wooden spoons, regardless of what anyone says.
Yeah, for sure. We're counting that.
All right, and to talk about international soccer, it's nice that we don't necessarily have to break up the U.S. and Canada conversation because they actually played each other. So that's kind of fun. We don't necessarily have to break it up. We're not going to talk a lot about the United States international soccer team. They're still waiting on Pochettino to be hired, all of that fun type of stuff. They played like crap on, Saturday? It was terrible. It wasn't
in front
fun.
of like nobody.
In front of nobody in Kansas City. It wasn't fun to watch. They have a lot of things to figure out. Pochettino does have a lot of things to figure out. But one player that does, well, I mean, besides maybe his future that he's going to need to figure out would be Jacob Schaffelberg. So we wanted to have this conversation a little bit because of the fact that Jacob Schaffelberg is starting for the Canadian team regularly now, where he's become almost a lock in his position no matter what he does. Did get a goal against the United States for Canada to beat the United States 2-1 in that friendly. There's some records about that's the first time that Canada has actually beat the U.S. in since I forgot what year, but it's been an extremely long time in the making. But Jacob Schaffelberg keeps showing up in an international level, which keeps on asking the conversation about is he going to stay in Nashville or not?
Yeah, I think the record you're talking about is beating the U.S. in the U.S.
Correct.
specifically, because I think they beat them in Canada in the CONCACAF qualifier, if I'm not mistaken, in that snow game. Um, that said, for Jacob Schaffelberg, I think we always go back to this one point, which to me, his club production is just nowhere near his national team production. That said, I think any scout out there or anybody interested in him will look at Nashville SC's current form, or at least Nashville SC's form since Leagues Cup last year, and say that's not really his fault, you know. And I think a lot of that does make sense when you look at it, because what is a left winger supposed to do when the team is giving up goals like they have been these last 10 games? I mean, you know, I think when the entire team when there isn't a midfielder who can pass forward for him for games in that stretch, there's only so much he can do. Now, the other side of it is obviously, well, if you're a star player, if you're that good of a player, you have to showcase what you have. And he has what, one league goal this entire season? I just think that's completely underwhelming. Regardless of what he does with the national team, I think that's going to be a mark on his record that he can't replicate it in a team that's struggling a little bit. And I think that's what's going to be a hard sell for someone in not in MLS, at least. Let's just say that.
It's really going to come down to whether or not he wants to force a move out, is what is going to be the case. I think that Nashville probably has a price on him. I think Nashville's price on him isn't likely to be met. And I don't think it's particularly high, to be honest, either. I think that Nashville will be willing to move on him for a fairly reasonable price. And because of that, I think if he wants to move, he can make that happen. The side of this that people have to keep in mind is that he's not some young kid anymore. He's a 24-year-old. And if he's going to want to play in Europe, it needs to happen sooner rather than later because that window might close. And this is something that we've seen with the Canadian national team before because this is what happened with Kyle Larin in Orlando, forcing the move to Besiktas. So, like, if he wants to move to Europe in the summer, he's probably going to be the one that has to force it. And because I don't think Nashville's really going to be out there trying to sell him. Now, if they want to just do a complete rebuild and try and like clean out house, which we don't think is going to happen, that's a different situation. But like, I can't see his club production not being a mark against him and certainly keeping the price, the European price on his head will probably be lower than what Nashville wants. And the only way that that goes down to a place where Nashville's willing to do it is if Schaffelberg wants to move on. And I think he might. He's going to look at this as his window to get out because he is 24, because he is coming off a Copa America where he was pretty widely considered to have a good tournament, and because he is scoring with the national team, and because the guy he's playing for on the national team, albeit a mixed record, has a decent record with at the certain levels of play in Europe. So I think that's the way he moves on.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he moved on, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he decides to just settle down. He's got a young kid coming in soon. Settle down in Nashville, maybe try and get a better contract situation stateside.
And that's all I was gonna say. Just to kind of put a bow into this is just I think if Nashville, whether or not Nashville wants to keep him, regardless, they have to give him a raise. I think at the end of the season, just to keep him around. I think to make sure he's satisfied. And I think they've done this with guys like Jack Mayer before. They've done that with guys in the past, like obviously Hani Mokhtar famously. So they've done this before, and I think they will continue to do it with Jacob Schaffelberg.
And just to add to that, they've also explicitly not done that. So like Alistair Johnston was them saying they weren't going to pay what Alistair wanted. Different situation, different position. Obviously, Nashville had plans with Shaq Moore already set in place, but they've also at times made the specific decision not to pay. So a couple things to watch for in the offseason, certainly.
Yeah, and you could see both Jacob Schaffelberg and Canada play on Tuesday, 9-10, whenever you're listening to this, against Mexico in Dallas, and then the U.S. plays New Zealand and Cincy on that same day as well. So be looking out for that. And there's a bunch of World Cup qualifiers going around all over the world still, international soccer. So that's a lot of fun. But I do believe that Jacob Schaffelberg should be back when we play Atlanta. Which is on Saturday away in Atlanta. Man, it feels weird because normally there's a lot more excitement when it comes to a match against Atlanta. I think some of it, of course, has to do with both teams in form. Both teams' specific form about where they're at. Both Nashville and Atlanta are not teams that are normally at the bottom of the table. So this is weird for both of us to see. I don't know. How do you want to start previewing this match? What do you want to start with?
Well, I think we got to talk about the matchup in itself. This fixture has been built up or has been attempted to be built up as this big rivalry, and I just don't think it has reached that level. I think there are some sort of you know, hate between the two fan bases or the two clubs, but really, and if you ask an Atlanta fan who are your top three teams that you hate the most, I think Nashville might crack second or third. And same thing with Nashville. I just don't know how many people are listing Atlanta as the team they hate the most in Nashville.
It is funny on that note, like going back to when Nashville was coming into MLS, they were really pushing like league wide Nashville, Atlanta as the rivalry, largely because on Nashville's end, they wanted Atlanta to be considered their rival because Atlanta was bringing the biggest crowds in soccer, was largely successful right before Nashville joined the league. And they definitely didn't want Cincinnati to be considered the rival because Cincinnati was terrible and Cincinnati was doing poorly. And why would you want to compare yourselves to Cincinnati when you can compare yourselves to Atlanta instead? And now here we are. and, and you're like, oh, well, I don't know how that worked out. I think it is a rivalry, but I think that it's just diehards right now in both fan bases. Like that stadium, I'm very curious to see how empty uh the Benz is when we're down there. They're a team in transition, just like Nashville is. They started their transition, last week with Carlos Bocanegra being let go. So they still don't have a coach. Like it's an interesting time, certainly in both. But when both of these teams are even okay, I think the animosity is felt. So if they both get on where they're good at the same time, it should be interesting.
And look, football stadiums look even worse when there are not that many people in them, and that's gonna be something I'm definitely gonna be looking for. Which is a good point, good time to say that Clay and I will both be there, in Atlanta. But yeah, Clay already mentioned that Garth Lagerwey kind of came in from Seattle and took over as the president of all operations for Atlanta, but Carlos Bocanegra was kind of part of the old regime, if you would, on the sporting side, but he moved on now. But Atlanta had an incredible eh, historical transfer window, and I think we have to mention it. They sold uh, like 40 million almost of worth of players. They sold Thiago Almada, they sold Yakumakis, and I can't remember who was the third big sell they had. Caleb Wiley to Chelsea. So like that's unprecedented. That we haven't seen that in MLS to generate that much money. They invested some of it. They brought back. They ended up buying a new DP. In Miranchuk from Atalanta. But I think they're waiting on the rest to spend the rest of the money until they get their coach and their sporting director in check. And I think that's going to be interesting because Rob Valentino is currently leading the team as the interim head coach, who has been interim head coach before because they've been in the situation before. Um, but yeah, I agree with Clay. I think if either of these teams was a little bit more competitive, I think this will be more exciting. But now, as things stand, I just don't know how excited either side is about this coming up.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to be a part of. Like, I mean, if we were both in more of a playoff position, I do believe it would probably be a little bit more feisty, a little bit more argumentative online. You just don't see any of it right now. I mean, and you'll see it. I don't think there's a ton of Nashville fans going. I know there are some, but Clay brought this up multiple times just with different supporter stuff where wins fix a lot of things. And we're finally seeing this precedent for this Nashville team for sure. And I mean, Atlanta as well. So with that, I mean, it's not going to be a 1-1 draw because only two of us are going to be there because I unfortunately will not be there. So that's good to know. So let's just kind of get into the plugs and predictions if that's what we got left.
I think it's been a while since I've predicted a Nashville win, so maybe I'll go for that. I'll go with a 3-1 Nashville win, and I'm gonna go with Surridge, 2 goals, and Sean Davis with the third goal. Um, Look, don't ask me. Don't even try to get me to explain what I just said. But I said what I said. Now I'm gonna go with Rios to score for Atlanta because, it's the Daniel Rios Derby after all. And I think we should respect that as people who exist in Nashville. Um, that said, I will be in Atlanta bringing you a lot of coverage. There might be some extra coverage after the match with certain someone who Nashville fans love. So make sure to tune in and follow me at Valer Shabila on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram, and also YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. And yeah, follow Kicking the 615 at chaos615.org.
Just out of curiosity, would that someone may have announced future career plans over the last week or so?
I'm not in a position to answer that.
Okay. Well, anybody that's paid attention to social media may know who he's hinting at. But for me, obviously, you can follow Nashville Soccer Archive. I am the local soccer person on here, so I'm just going to run through a couple big stories in college soccer that are going on in Nashville right now. Obviously, Nashville soccer is having a bit of a moment, and by a bit of a moment, I mean nobody's really blowing the doors off things at the moment. And so, but I will say this: Lipscomb, the men are playing Kentucky, which has been a pretty good program over the years. On Saturday, Lipscomb are looking to get back on the winning side of things. They're 2-2-1 on the season. The Belmont men have an even bigger game. They're playing the fourth-ranked Western Michigan Broncos on Sunday at a very popular park for the members of the Rainbow Unicorns at so they'll be hosting it at Rose Park. So check out that. They're giving a soccer scarf away. They'll also have the Belmont women playing in that game as well against UT Chat. Belmont's not having a great season. Lipscomb women are at Ole Miss. They are 3-2-1 overall. And then MTSU, hey, they're playing South Alabama, and that's all you really need to know. That's happening this week. And Vandy has been the best Division I program in the city. They're currently undefeated, and they'll be hosting Eastern Kentucky on Thursday. If you go outside of Nashville a little bit, I just want to shout out both the Cumberland men and women's programs. They're each 6-0. They're each ranked in NAIA. Both are playing ranked teams, several ranked teams over the course of the next few days. But the Cumberland women, who are coached by a friend of the show, Scotty Davidson, they have scored 46 goals in 6 matches, and they've allowed 2. So go check out Cumberland. They're blowing the doors off things. And last but not least, shout out to Motlow. Motlow State is the 15th ranked team in the NJCAA. So shout out to the junior colleges as well. And after all you do all of that, after you go check out all those teams, you can watch Nashville win 2-1 against Atlanta, with Hani Mukhtar being involved in both goals. Also follow me at Clay Lasol on Twitter and Instagram.
At PHStevenHD. I don't have any.
Come on, Steven. Come on,
What?
Steven. Give us a good Steven prediction. The world needs healing.
I mean, look, I'm speaking.
It's a Cumberland soccer store. Give us a 17-0.
Yeah, give us something.
I'm speaking this into existence until it happens. I just want chaos. This is all I want. It's going to be a 4-4 draw is going to happen until I'm going to keep predicting it until it happens. 4 goals by Hani Mukhtar and then 4 goals by Daniel Rios.
I was hoping you would say 4 goals by Hani Mukhtar, 4 goals by Daniel Rios, 4 own goals by Daniel Rios.
Just all goals by Daniel Rios.
Daniel Rios with a double hat trick and some.
Well, I hope you had a good time listening to the show, just like we had a good time putting it on. Thank you again so much for listening. We'll be back next week, of course, to talk about that Atlanta match, hopefully following both more of Clay and Valera's predictions, because that'd be a lot more fun to talk about. Well, my prediction would be a lot of fun to talk about as well. That would be a lot of fun to talk about. So hopefully we're talking about one of our predictions, and we're going to be here next week to talk about that. So appreciate the time, appreciate everybody listening, and we'll be back next week. Clay and Valera, I will miss you both in Atlanta. I wish I was there, but y'all have a good time. So bye, everybody.